Hey ladies, tonight we're diving into something that every emotionally intelligent woman has felt. That confusing, painful moment when a man starts pulling away just when things are finally getting close. You feel like you did everything right. You listened, you supported, you opened your heart. And just when you thought he was about to meet you there, he retreats. You replay every conversation in your head, wondering if you said something wrong. But deep down, you know you didn't. What you're actually facing isn't about you being too much or too emotional. It's about him and his avoidant attachment style. This kind of man craves connection but fears intimacy. He wants love, but the second it feels too real, he panics. And if you've ever tried to love someone like that, you know how emotionally exhausting it can be. In this episode, we're breaking down the avoidant attachment trap, why he pulls away when you get close, the psychology behind his walls, and how you can finally stop chasing love that runs from you. Let's start. What's really going on inside an avoidant man's mind? Avoidant men aren't cold by accident. Their distance is protection, not cruelty. From the outside, they seem calm, collected, even confident. But underneath that control lies a quiet fear, the fear of being truly known. Many of them grew up in environments where emotions weren't safe. Maybe their parents dismissed their feelings, or love came with conditions. Over time, they learned a painful lesson. If I depend on someone, I'll get hurt. So when you come into their life, kind, nurturing, emotionally intelligent, they're drawn to you. You represent everything they've secretly wanted but never believed they could handle. You're warm. You listen. You make them feel seen. But the closer they get, the more their old programming screams danger. Suddenly, your emotional availability doesn't feel safe. It feels threatening. Your openness reminds them of the vulnerability they've spent their whole life avoiding. So they start to pull back, slowly at first. Maybe they stop texting as much. Maybe they cancel plans or say they're just busy. You can feel the emotional gap growing, even when they insist everything's fine. And here's the cruel irony. The more you try to bridge that gap, by being patient, kind, understanding, the more they retreat. Because for them, closeness equals pressure, and pressure equals danger. But don't confuse his withdrawal with lack of care. Avoidant men often love deeply. They just don't know how to stay close without feeling trapped. His silence isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's survival. When you first meet an avoidant man, everything feels effortless. He's attentive, funny, emotionally present. He'll share stories about his life, his past, even his dreams. You start to think, maybe he's different. Maybe he's emotionally available after all. And for a while, he really believes it too. That's what makes avoidant attachment so tricky. It doesn't start with distance. It starts with connection. But as soon as the emotional intimacy begins to deepen, something subtle shifts inside him. Your warmth, the thing he once adored, starts to make him anxious. Your texts, which once made him smile, now make him feel crowded. Your vulnerability, once beautiful, now feels dangerous. It's not that he stops caring. It's that caring too much feels overwhelming. He's been trained, often unconsciously, to associate closeness with loss of self. To him, love feels like giving up control. So he begins the cycle, the push and pull. He comes close enough to feel safe, then withdraws the moment things get too real. He might stop replying as quickly, delay meeting plans, or emotionally shut down when you express your needs. And each time he pulls away, you feel this ache, this confusion, that somehow you must have done something wrong. You start thinking, maybe I was too emotional. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe if I give him space, he'll come back. And for a while he does. He'll reappear, acting as if nothing happened. He'll say he just needed time to think, or that work was stressful, or that you were just getting too intense. The relief you feel in those moments is intoxicating. You forgive him, you reconnect, and you hope this time will be different. But the pattern repeats, every single time. This is the avoidant trap, a loop of intimacy followed by retreat, closeness followed by withdrawal. The deeper truth? He's not avoiding you. He's avoiding the emotions you awaken in him. Emotions that remind him of dependence, of need, of childhood pain he never processed. When he's with you, your presence forces him to confront the part of himself that still feels small, unprotected, and scared. You, the emotionally intelligent woman, feel responsible for helping him heal. You think if I love him enough, he'll learn to stay. But that's where your empathy can turn into self-betrayal. Because love cannot fix what someone refuses to face. He needs control to feel safe. And you, in your effort to make things work, might start shrinking yourself to preserve the peace. You stop expressing needs. You stop bringing up what hurts. You start walking on emotional eggshells just to keep him close. But here's the hard truth. When you silence your emotions to make him comfortable, you're unconsciously reinforcing his fear. You're teaching him that intimacy can exist without vulnerability. Avoidant men often crave love from a safe emotional distance. They want companionship, but not confrontation. Affection, but not accountability. They long for warmth, but only in doses that don't melt their walls. This is why the cycle feels endless. The more you give, the less he can handle. The more you understand him, the less he feels the need to grow. At first, his independence might have seemed attractive, like confidence. But now, you see the truth. It's not independence. It's emotional isolation disguised as strength. So what can you do when someone you love keeps pulling away? How do you protect your peace without hardening your heart? It often begins with something small. He stops calling as much, or he becomes vague about his feelings. You sense it immediately. The energy shifts. The connection you once felt starts to fade, and your mind begins to spiral. Did I say something wrong? Is he losing interest? Should I give him space or fight for this? This is the emotional battlefield of every woman who has ever loved an avoidant man. You're not imagining things. Your nervous system feels the change before your mind can explain it. Because emotional intelligence is both your gift and your curse. You're deeply attuned to energy, tone, and silence. You feel the distance before he even acknowledges it. And instead of reacting with anger or detachment, you try to understand. You rationalize. You empathize. You tell yourself he's just scared. He's been hurt before. Maybe if I love him in the right way, he'll finally feel safe enough to stay. That's where the trap begins. Because when you start to heal him instead of protecting yourself, your empathy turns into self-abandonment. You stop listening to your own discomfort, your own intuition, your own needs, and you begin listening only to his wounds. You begin to make excuses for his silence. He just needs time. He's processing things. He's not good at expressing emotions. But here's what dark psychology teaches us. Empathy, when unguarded, becomes the perfect entry point for manipulation. Not always intentional, but powerful nonetheless. An avoidant man doesn't need to raise his voice or gaslight you directly to control you. All he has to do is withdraw affection, subtly enough that you start questioning your own worth. You'll begin overanalyzing every text, rereading every conversation, decoding every emoji. You become emotionally hooked, not because you're weak, but because your brain starts chasing the high of connection that used to feel so easy. Psychologically, this creates something known as intermittent reinforcement, the same conditioning pattern used in addictive behaviors. When affection comes unpredictably, one moment warm, the next cold, your brain releases dopamine not in response to love itself, but to the hope of love returning. You start chasing the next moment of closeness, and that's where the control begins. The avoidant doesn't even have to ask you to chase him. Your nervous system does it for him. You start initiating more conversations, softening your words, suppressing your needs, apologizing for being too much. You start earning love instead of receiving it. It's not that you're unaware. Deep down, you feel something is off. You sense the imbalance. You know you're the one doing the emotional labor, maintaining the connection, soothing the tension, repairing what he quietly breaks. But you keep going because the connection isn't all bad. When he comes back, when he opens up even for a moment, it feels like sunlight after weeks of darkness. He looks into your eyes, tells you he missed you, and for a few hours, you feel seen again. And that temporary warmth convinces you that maybe, just maybe, this time he'll stay. But he won't. Not until he faces his own fear of intimacy. And here's the painful paradox. Your emotional intelligence, the very thing that makes you so understanding, becomes the reason you stay longer than you should. You keep seeing potential instead of patterns. You keep nurturing what could be instead of accepting what is. You might even start believing that your love is the test, that you were meant to teach him how to feel, how to love, how to stay. But that's not your lesson to teach, because emotional availability can't be transferred through empathy. It must be chosen through self-awareness. So what happens when you keep giving to someone who can't receive? You start emptying yourself emotionally. Your light dims slowly. You become anxious, self-critical, exhausted, all while he remains emotionally steady, even distant. The imbalance becomes invisible because on the surface, everything seems calm. There are no loud arguments, no dramatic breakups, just quiet detachment. And yet, you're the one carrying the emotional weight of two people. And here's the part most women miss. His withdrawal is not about you being too much. It's about him being unable to tolerate genuine emotional closeness. You remind him of something he's spent his life avoiding: dependence, vulnerability, need. Every time you reach out, you awaken his buried fears. And every time he pulls away, you awaken your own: rejection, abandonment, unworthiness. The result? Two people dancing around connection while fearing the very intimacy they crave. You tell yourself you're done. You tell yourself you won't reach out this time. You even delete the messages, put your phone face down, and promise yourself you'll move on. But somehow, he still finds a way back into your thoughts. One small trigger, a song, a scent, an old text, and suddenly your mind drifts to him again. You remember the good moments, the laughter, the soft ways he once held your hand. And even though your rational mind knows this relationship hurts you, your emotional body aches for his presence. This is not weakness. This is psychological conditioning. When you bond with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, you're not just falling in love. You're entering a dopamine-cortisol cycle that mimics addiction. Here's how it works. Every time he pulls away, your body goes into stress mode. Cortisol rises. You feel anxious, restless, uneasy. Your brain craves resolution, a return to emotional safety. Then, when he finally comes back, sends a text, calls you baby again, or shows a moment of vulnerability, your brain releases dopamine. Relief floods your system, and your subconscious learns something dangerous. Pain is followed by pleasure. So it begins to crave the entire cycle, not just the good moments, but the tension that comes before them. That's why walking away from an avoidant feels harder than leaving someone who actually mistreats you openly. Because the hurt is subtle, quiet, and disguised as space, your mind keeps convincing you it's fixable. You tell yourself he's not bad, just scared. He's not cold, just cautious. And because you understand him, because you see the child behind his armor, you start to mistake empathy for connection. This is called trauma bonding. It doesn't require abuse, only inconsistent affection. It's a bond built on emotional highs and lows, where the very person causing your pain becomes the only one who can soothe it. Each time you forgive him for disappearing, each time you wait for him to figure himself out, each time you accept his silence as something you must tolerate, you reinforce the bond. And the darker part? He can sense it, even if not consciously. Avoidant personalities often feel safest when they sense they hold emotional power. When you chase, they relax. When you detach, they panic. Not because they suddenly want intimacy, but because they feel control slipping away. So they pull you back in. A late-night text, a nostalgic message, a small miss you, and that tiny breadcrumb becomes your hit of dopamine. You might tell yourself you're strong enough not to respond, but that single message lights up the same reward centers in your brain that are triggered by drugs or gambling. You feel alive again. And that's what makes this dynamic so psychologically gripping. It's not just emotional, it's neurochemical. You're not addicted to him. You're addicted to the emotional pattern he creates. To break it, you have to stop seeking closure from the very person who thrives in confusion. Because closure is his comfort zone, not yours. The avoidant survives through ambiguity. Clear communication threatens the emotional distance he needs to feel safe. When you ask him to open up, he shuts down. When you demand clarity, he withdraws. When you try to end things calmly, he becomes charming again. He doesn't do this because he's evil. He does it because emotional ambiguity gives him control. It allows him to stay half in, half out, close enough to keep you hooked, distant enough to stay safe. But here's what he doesn't expect: the moment you stop reacting. When you stop reaching out, when you stop chasing the emotional crumbs, when you stop justifying his inconsistency, that's when the balance shifts. Because avoidance feeds on your effort. Every attempt to reconnect becomes proof that you'll tolerate disconnection. Every act of understanding becomes permission for him to keep withholding. So the only true antidote to this psychological trap is emotional neutrality. Not coldness, not revenge, just stillness. You don't try to fix. You don't try to decode. You simply observe. You start seeing patterns instead of promises. You stop waiting for the good version of him to return, because now you understand that version was a mask, not a phase. The moment your nervous system stops chasing the next high, the addiction begins to lose power. The cycle breaks not when you stop loving him, but when you stop needing the pain to prove the love was real. That's the invisible transformation every woman must go through when healing from an avoidant bond, realizing that love and anxiety were never meant to coexist. There comes a moment, quiet but powerful, when something inside you finally clicks. You realize that you've spent months, maybe even years, trying to decode a man who never wanted to be solved. You've analyzed every silence, rationalized every withdrawal, and blamed yourself for emotions he never knew how to hold. But tonight your heart whispers the truth. It was never about not being enough. It was about giving too much to someone who never felt safe receiving. That realization doesn't come with fireworks. It comes softly, usually after one too many goodbyes that led nowhere. After nights staring at your phone, waiting for a message that doesn't come. After you've exhausted every possible version of understanding, you reach an emotional stillness, not because you stopped caring, but because you've finally run out of illusions to feed. And that's when your healing begins. Because real detachment isn't about hating him or proving him wrong. It's about remembering who you were before you kept shrinking yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Let's talk about how to come home to that version of you again. Avoidant men feed on emotional energy, not in a malicious way, but as a coping mechanism. When you're anxious, pleading, or seeking clarity, you're engaged. And engagement means connection, even if it's conflict. To the avoidant, that still feels like emotional closeness. So the most powerful thing you can do is this: stop explaining yourself. Stop trying to make him understand. Stop reacting to his distance. You withdraw not as punishment, but as protection. Every message you don't send, every conversation you don't start, becomes a thread cut in the web that kept you stuck. You stop being the emotional provider. You stop feeding the dynamic. You stop trying to fix what was never your job to repair. It's not silence out of spite. It's silence as self-respect. Healing from an avoidant relationship isn't just emotional, it's biological. Your body has been living in constant fight or flight. You've been trained to anticipate his moods, to brace for withdrawal, to chase relief after rejection. Now you have to teach your body safety again. That means grounding, literally. Go for walks, breathe deeply, touch things around you, reconnect with the physical world. It means self-soothing. Talking to yourself the way you used to talk to him when he was spiraling. When you feel the urge to text him, pause. Place your hand on your chest and ask yourself, what am I really craving right now? Him or peace? Most of the time, the answer is peace. You just got used to seeking it through him. Now your job is to give it back to yourself. Avoidant dynamics leave scars on your sense of self-worth. They teach you that love is something you must earn, prove, or chase. But that's not love, that's conditioning. So start rewriting the story. Instead of saying, he's scared of intimacy, start saying, I deserve emotional availability. Instead of, he just needs time, remind yourself, my time matters too. Your healing depends on the story you tell yourself about why things happened. If you make it about your inadequacy, you'll keep repeating the pattern. If you make it about your evolution, you'll finally break free. Every connection, even the painful ones, reflect something within us. So ask yourself, what did this dynamic mirror about me? For many emotionally intelligent women, the avoidant partner reflects an old emotional wound, usually one tied to earning love through care. Maybe you were taught as a child that love came from being helpful, calm, or understanding. Maybe you were praised for how well you managed others' emotions, not your own. So, when you met him, the man who needed patience, the man who didn't know how to stay, your inner child thought, "This is my purpose again. I can make him feel safe." But healing means breaking that pattern too. You can care without carrying. You can understand without absorbing. You can love without losing yourself. That's how you reclaim your power, by no longer mistaking self-abandonment for compassion. There will come a night when you no longer crave the message. You won't need closure. You won't even feel angry. You'll just feel calm. That's what healing really looks like. Not a grand epiphany, not revenge, just neutrality. You'll remember the relationship, but it won't control you anymore. His silence won't sting. His distance won't define you, because you'll finally see that the real love story wasn't between you and him. It was between you and the part of yourself that refused to give up on love, even after being hurt. That part of you, the one that tried, cared, stayed, forgave, deserves gentleness now. You didn't fail. You simply outgrew what your soul could no longer tolerate. And when the right man enters your life, one who doesn't flinch at intimacy, one who doesn't retreat when you love deeply, you'll recognize the difference instantly. Because this time, you'll meet him as a woman who no longer chases peace in chaos. You'll meet him as someone who already found it within herself. So, take a deep breath. If you're still here listening till the end, it means part of you recognized yourself somewhere in this story. Maybe you've loved someone who kept you guessing, who pulled away right when you started to feel safe. Maybe you've spent nights analyzing messages, waiting for a sign that he still cares, still remembers, still sees you. But tonight, I want you to remember something powerful. You are not hard to love. You were just trying to love someone who hadn't learned how to stay. His silence wasn't proof of your inadequacy. It was proof of his fear. And his fear has nothing to do with your worth. There's a certain peace that comes when you stop chasing answers from people who live in confusion, when you stop fighting to be chosen and instead choose yourself. Because love doesn't always look like holding on. Sometimes it's the quiet courage to let go. And when you finally do, something beautiful happens. Your energy begins to return to you. The parts of you that were dimmed to keep the connection alive begin to glow again. You rediscover softness, not as a weakness, but as strength. So tonight, if your heart feels heavy, I want you to place your hand over it and whisper, "I'm learning to love myself in ways others never could." Because that's what this journey is about. Not punishment, not bitterness, but evolution. And if this story resonated with you, stay with me. Because in the next episode, we're diving even deeper into why emotionally intelligent women attract emotionally unavailable men, and how to finally break that magnetic pull for good. Until then, take care of your heart. And remember, the right love won't make you question your worth.